Welcome, everyone, to the Next Gen Call Center series, where we interview experts and get their perspectives, best practices, and insights when it comes to implementing AI in your call center. Today, we're very privileged to have James Fan, co-founder and CTO of Tomato.ai. Previously, he was a senior manager at Google, where he built out the insights and analytics solution and the organization for CCAI. He then went on to lead the Google Cloud Speech Group. James, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you very much, Chad.
Absolutely.
Great to be here.
Yeah, so we've already had a chance to interview Ofer a little bit ago, and now we get the chance to interview the second half of Tomato.ai from a founder perspective. So as we kick things off, why don't you share with us, a little bit about your experience in the call center space? As I understand, it's quite extensive from Google and also previous companies. You've worked at, obviously CCAI, as we mentioned, as well as, IBM Watson, back in the day. So would love to kind of get an understanding of your experience in the space.
Yeah, my journey in the contact center space started with my first startup. That was in 2016. At the time, I was doing my first startup, and I knew I want to apply AI to some practical domain that people can benefit from the AI. We thought about customer service, and that's how I first came into contact with contact centers. At the time, we were mostly focusing on chat channel, so chatbots. And later, when I joined Google Contact Center AI, we began to devote more focus to voice channel. In contact centers, while chat is a fast-growing channel, voice is the most costly channel for them because for each call, agent has to answer one call at a time, cannot handle multiple calls at a time. And each call sometimes can last 20 minutes or so. So potentially the cost for enterprise is quite significant in the voice channel.
Absolutely. I also would love for you to maybe share, so you had mentioned to me a story when you were in college, why augmenting humans with AI is meaningful for you. So I was wondering if you could share with the audience that story.
Yeah, that's right. So as I mentioned earlier on, when we were doing the voice bot and the chat bot, our task was try to automate these work that people are doing. But this actually is not what I originally thought about it. From a long time ago, back in grad school, like first conference, AI conference I attended, I went to this invited speaker that talked about this superhuman capability. They're talking about a camera that gives superhuman capability. You can see wavelength that's not outside the visible wavelength. They can see at rates that your human eyes won't be able to perceive. Some people may argue that's not really AI because this is more like a fancy camera, but that got me thinking that is, AI has a role to play, that potentially AI can enable people to do things that otherwise not able to do. So at Tomato.ai, we're taking a different approach. Instead of trying to automate people's work, we're trying to enable people. We're trying to empower people, letting them to do things they're otherwise not able to do, letting them to communicate with people more effectively, making them qualify for jobs that otherwise won't be qualified.
Absolutely. So it's that kind of same human superpowers story. So I would love also for you to maybe share the origin story of how kind of Tomato.ai came to be. I know Ofer had shared there's kind of a funny story to it that's actually a very practical application, as we see today.
Yeah, so this story dated a while back. When I was at Google, I was talking to Pedro. He's from Spain. Pedro one day came to have a chat with me, and then he mentioned his Spanish accent is not being taken as serious in America. He said, which accent is taken serious? British accent. When people talk with British accent in America, people take their words very seriously. And then he says, if somebody's speaking French accent, then I'm sure Americans will buy wine and cheese from the people with the French accent. That got me thinking. As I work at a contact center AI at Google. we work with a lot of contact centers that hire offshore agents that speak with heavy accent. So I begin to think, it will be great if we have a technology that can alleviate some of these communication bottleneck for offshore agents. Um, this frustration goes both ways. It's frustrating for the customers not able to understand the agent. It's also frustrating for the agent for not being understood and sometimes being abused by customers due to their accent.
Definitely. So kind of speaking on the origin story, why don't you share a little bit about the technical team that you have put together? Because, as Ofer had mentioned to me previously, and I know we kind of had a conversation, just a world-class technical team of, specialists, backgrounds from Google and elsewhere.
Yeah, we have an awesome team. We have quite a few ex-Googlers, ex-Meta, ex-Amazon, Samsung, Uber, etc. Um, I don't remember how many. I think probably close to half the team has PhD. Um, so we have a very deep, talented team, very passionate about the project we're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like an imperative, especially when you have a very challenging problem like this that you all are pioneering, which seems like a great opportunity. So before we kind of chat a little bit more about the actual product itself, let's kind of talk about what does a modern day call center today look like? In previous interviews, we've interviewed folks that were standing these call centers up when there was no precedent. There was no, standard operating procedure back in the 1990s. And obviously we've come a long way today. So like, what does the modern day call center look like today, James?
Yeah, it's a huge operation. So for a large enterprise like AT&T or these kind of top enterprise, they have thousands of agents working the phones. So if you imagine each agent's taking a cubicle, thousands of agents, that's going to be like dozens of football fields as eyes you can see. That's a massive operation. What the enterprise typically do is they have multiple business processing organizations, BPOs, to handle the volume. They have BPOs often own the contact center. Some of these contact centers are owned by the enterprise directly. And unfortunately, when it comes to customer service, a lot of time, while they want to improve the customer experience, but also they're under severe budget restrictions as well. So that makes it, these are competing priorities. That makes it difficult for them to fulfill both. Sometimes the agents are packed in relatively small space. That's why when you talk to an agent, you sometimes can hear other agents talking in the background because it's a very crowded area. From the enterprise point of view, this is still a very expensive operation. Um, when the agent pick up a call, that's going to cost them somewhere around $10 for each call. For some enterprises, that's even more. So this is quite expensive operations.
Right. And I think maybe a good segue is, obviously we're seeing like this proliferation of hype around generative AI. So can you kind of give us your perspective on that? Obviously, leveraging AI in call centers and contact centers is not anything new, but generative AI is obviously a additional, opportunity to kind of push the needle as far as business outcomes. So like, how do you see it, from a hype standpoint versus reality today?
Yeah, I think generative AI is a great technology. It's helping people in a number of these fields. But when it comes to contact centers, there are some concerns. One of the issue is generative AI is good or correct most of the time, but not all the time. This could be an issue when it comes to sensitive customer interactions, especially anything dealing with billing or some health-related topics. Um, I have experienced personally that a chatbot powered by generative AI is giving me completely wrong information, but in this such a authoritative tone. So I thought it's true. He said, oh, just go to this screen followed by that screen, then you'll find this. There's no such screen. Later, I had to talk to a human agent to verify. It wasn't my eyes going blind. It's just that such thing didn't exist. The chatbot was just making things up. Also, one thing we learned from contact center AI experience is, as great as a chatbot is, chatbot still doesn't resolve majority of these issues for the agents, because some of these is because people just feel the need to talk to another human agent. Sometimes it's just because they are still these very weird corner cases, so many different corner cases. Chatbots is not able to handle this. And from enterprise point of view, one of the issue enterprise have talked to me about when it comes to using AI technology is they worry about the response AI give. Right? There's one thing is, what if AI give wrong credits or discounts to these customers that I didn't want to give, but on this large scale, I can potentially be liable for huge loss. Or what if AI is behaving in such ways that doesn't reflect our brand, um, or doesn't reflect our style? There could be sensitivity, cultural sensitivity issues that can potentially damaging to the brand. Those things are all need to be carefully thought out.
Absolutely. Yeah, to your point, risk profile, very important in addition to, price, as well as like consistency and quality of outputs. Seems to be things that, many of these enterprises are kind of circling the wagons on. I was at a recent conference in Berlin, AI conference, and probably like out of the majority of enterprise companies, like people leveraging generative AI from a consumer facing standpoint was actually quite small percentage still. Many are still using traditional, NLP, NLU supervised models, because they just work, and we know kind of the outputs that we're going to get out of them at this point. So would you say at this point we're kind of at this phase still where we're trying to, obviously address some of those concerns around risk profile, quality of outputs, latency, pricing, while at the same time trying to identify what are the use cases that are actually practical for this technology? Would you say we're kind of still at that space right now?
Yeah, I think we're still exploring. I think there is definitely a role for generative AI to play in this space, but also we should be very much aware of the potential pitfalls, and we will find a good space for this generative AI technology.
Definitely. So kind of switching gears, more so specific to what Tomato AI is doing. Could you kind of give us a walkthrough of the Tomato AI tech and kind of how it works at a high level?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a cloud-based system. What we do is we will install a small PC app on the agent's desktop. What this PC app does is it functions as a virtual mic. So when the agent is talking to the physical mic, the audio stream will be captured by the virtual mic, which sends the audio stream to our cloud models that run the inference to apply the transformation to the audio stream, and then sends the audio stream back to the PC. That goes on to the voice over IP application the agent is using.
Absolutely.
Compared to some other approaches that's based on device, that's processing everything on device. This allow us to use a more complex, larger model, so that we can run processing the latest technology. This also puts less strain on the agent's desktop. Agent desktop, agents don't have the latest desktop technology. They often use a cheap desktop, and they have many apps running that's using the CPU cycle. By doing so, we are shifting computing into the cloud instead of on the agent's desktop.
Yeah, absolutely. That seemed to be like kind of one of the main differentiators between, what Tomato AI is pioneering versus some of your competitors on the market. To your point, many of them are, installing these things, on these very slow computers in these call centers, which, doesn't seem super optimal from a lot of different perspectives. That being said, can you kind of talk about from an AI perspective, tell us about kind of some of the AI work and research being pioneered by yourself and your team.
Yeah, so what our team is doing is we're building AI in this homegrown fashion. I know there's a lot of startups that are essentially just putting a facade on like a commonly used large language model, but we are using doing our own large language model. It's a acoustic based, audio based, but instead of text based language model. But we are doing something similar. And we have quite a bit computing resource obtained from Google Cloud that use, as well as quite a bit of data used for our training. This allows us to do this homegrown computing task and building our language model from scratch, essentially.
Definitely. So out of curiosity, like what is the benefits of, you said, obviously most large language models are text-based, but you took a different route where you're going audio-based. Like what was the rationale behind that?
Yeah, so the reason for that is our model is a speech-to-speech model. There's no text involved. So in order to, so large, any of these text-based language model won't be applicable for us because there's no text in the first place. That also is why we have to do our own language model that's audio-based, using audio tokens instead of text tokens.
Definitely. So I'm guessing, Tomato AI is probably one of a few companies, kind of pioneering audio-based large language models. Would you say that's kind of a fair sentiment to make, or?
Yes, so I think audio token-based large language model is a hot area for the speech community, and we are at the very forefront for compared to the other startups in this space.
Right. So, and I also know with Tomato AI, there's multiple use cases you all are addressing, and I think you alluded to the noise cancellation when you mentioned, sometimes it's very noisy, and that's a feature that you have rolled out. And then also, obviously, accent softening kind of being the premier feature here. And then I know there's some other features that you all are working on as well. Can you kind of speak to the portfolio of features you guys are looking to roll out to companies?
Yeah, so for Tomato.ai, our mission is to help people to communicate and help them increase their employment opportunities. That's our mission. So we are trying to do a variety of things to help people communicate, to understand each other better. Accent softening is one way of doing that. Noise cancellation is another way of doing that. And in the long run, we think that we will go beyond these features, but also things like potentially small grammatic corrections, um, or even a diarization, localization of terminology, because people from different part of the world may refer to the same thing with different words that may cause confusion for communication. Um, yeah, Offer likes to use this example of people in India tend to say needful uh, to express in need, and versus I think people in Britain use a different word to say eggplant. I remember the first time I heard it, I was really caught my attention. It's like, what is that? Then somebody had to explain to me that's actually eggplant.
Yeah, yeah. And I think he also uses the example of, I think he said, if a French person, if a person with a French accent could sell you wine, you might be more amenable to purchasing it from them. So that localization opportunity seems like very interesting space, to explore in the near future here. But it sounds like for the near term, the focal point is very much on accent softening within the market spaces you have already kind of gone after. India, Philippines, and I know you were looking to branch out into some other spaces at this point, as well as kind of noise cancellation. And from what I've seen and heard, the noise cancellation model is quite good in comparison to some of the other competitors on the market, would you say?
Yeah, yeah. So this noise cancellation is sort of like a accidental discovery. We didn't set out to do noise cancellation, but then because we are taking this Gen AI approach, we are generating the speech, or we are regenerating the speech, and the noise is automatically filtered out. Actually, it will be really difficult if you ask me to retain the noise, because our generation doesn't include the noise. And as a result, we get a very good noise cancellation technology out of this. This
Yeah,
is very different from the previously like a digital signal processing based noise cancellation. This is Gen AI based noise cancellation.
right. Yeah, I was just going to say, I guess that's one of the really exciting properties of large language models, right? You can get these emergent properties out of them and discover them. And I imagine, as you continue down this research and development path, you will discover many more interesting and useful use cases. So that's really exciting to hear that.
Yeah.
So kind of, pivoting a little bit, and, I know you've spoken with, obviously countless executive stakeholders, on the BPO side, at the end, kind of mid-market and enterprise customer side that are actually implementing these in their own call centers. What would be some advice you would give them today, as far as how do they position themselves around these AI trade winds? Obviously, many companies are at different stages of that maturity cycle. But what would be some general advice, as they're hearing all this hype, and, perhaps their board or their executive team is coming to them saying, you guys need to be looking at this now, right?
Yeah. So I think first of all, as usual, whenever there's a hot topic, there's always a lot of noise out there, right? You need to tease apart the noise from the real technology that can work for you. And as any technology, is certain area that works really well versus certain area not necessarily working that well. So you need to do the exploration. And for BPOs in particular, I think there's a lot of this hype about chatbots potentially can do all this through automation. I don't think that's true. I think people prefer a human touch, prefer to talk to human agent, but there are AI technology that can potentially help the human agent. Um, what we are doing is one way of helping the human agent. There are other ways to helping the human agent as well, but in general, the AI technology could be just help empower human agents.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the nice thing too about what Tomato AI has built is that, instead of having to build out some sort of agent assist platform or implement something like that, which is a very long process for integration, change management, right? With Tomato AI, virtual microphone, you could probably stand it up in a couple of weeks, and have your agents using it. So I think that's kind of an amazing benefit of what you all have built here. And also want to touch a little bit on some of the use cases, and you alluded to it as part of the mission, right? As to provide more employment opportunities for some of these agents, because as I understand, typically there's some sort of English assessment, right? And sometimes they don't have the required degree of English skills, right? And it sounds like with Tomato AI, agents might be able to still become agents and get hired, even if they don't have that level of, English language competency, it sounds like.
Yeah, but before you go there, I think you touched on an interesting point I want to emphasize again. So you were saying deployment issues. That is a lesson I learned from my experience for my startup as well as from contact center, because deployment is always a pain point. IT organizations will be very busy, and any type of integration is difficult, especially if you need to integrate with multiple systems within their IT ecosystem. For us, we learned this lesson, and that's why we took a much easier deployment process that you'll work with any of these voice over IP system, whether it's Vonage or Avaya, etc. And another lesson I learned from the whole contact center experience is, if we need to build a separate model for each customer, that's a very slow process as well. We need to get the data from the customer, which take a long time. It has to go through the security review, has to go through the privacy review, get the data. We have to do the training, build a model, deploy, and then we have to go several iterations before we can feel this is really good. And that's a very slow process. On the other hand, when I was leading the Google Cloud Speech, one nice thing about it is Speech has only generic models. We don't do like per customer models. That makes scalable things are much more scalable, much easier to deploy. And in this case, at Tomato.ai, we do the same thing. We do one model that serves across customer. That makes much easier to scale out across customers. So we have easy deployment and easy scalable solution. All right, sorry to distract you. Going back to the agent's English capability. That's right. So often right now, a lot of BPOs will have essentially English tests. They have some of these commonly used English tests. And the agents that don't pass the English test basically are not qualified to do the job. As I mentioned, our mission is try to improve people's employment opportunities. Our hope is by softening the accent, there will be a lot of these people that previously not qualified for this job will be able to be qualified for this job, will be able to pass the English test. And as a result of that, then they will have increased their employment opportunities for them.
100%. And I think that's the amazing thing about Tomato AI, right? It's like kind of it's a force multiplier across all these things, right? Business outcomes, the end customer is happier because the interpretability, the understanding is a lot better for them. The agent is happier, right? Because they're able to get gainful employment. Perhaps in the past that might not have been possible. And then for the actual end customer or the enterprise or the BPO, they're able to go from 0 to 100 very quickly with not a lot of overhead from the standpoint of training a custom model or spending lengthy time doing change management to try and get everyone to use this software. So I do think it is very revolutionary. And to your point, I think it's just a great technology. And it sounds like these things are going to get deployed in very, very large organizations very soon here. So it's exciting times.
Yeah, I hope so. And then remember the enterprise and the BPOs, one thing they care a lot is the customer experience. So by hoping that, the consumers will be able to communicate better with the agents, they will get better customer experience. They also want to make sure improve their agent retention rate. I mentioned sometimes agents get abused due to their accent, and that is a contributing factor to the agent retention rate. We're hoping that we'll see an improved agent retention rate as a result of this as well.
Absolutely. So switching gears a little bit. So we talked about how companies should strategically position themselves. We've spoken about, how Tomato AI has positioned themselves to create value, across the landscape here. But what are some of the biggest challenges that you're currently seeing companies face? Challenges or misconceptions, because to your point, there's a lot of noise today about generative AI. What are those biggest challenges that you currently see today as you speak to some of these companies?
I think there's a lot of confusion in terms of the capability, what AI can do. And there's a lot of fear mongering. As usual, when something new happens that people don't fully understand, there's a lot of fear mongering. There's people worried that AI is going to take over the world. This AI is going to take over all these jobs, which I don't think is the case. And there's worry about how AI can cause significant damage to a brand's image, which I think that's a legitimate concern if AI is not used properly. You need to do due diligence of use the AI, deploy the AI in the proper way to avoid such things. You have to take in all the precautions. But if done correctly, that problem can be alleviated.
Right. And maybe as a follow-on question, and this will be one of our last questions, is what are some best practices I guess you can share? Because I know you kind of mentioned like you have to do these things in the right way, right? You need to be very conscious about what you're deploying. So what would be some best practices that you would share?
Yeah, so I think testing, extensive testing. Um, one thing we found is um, there are always different ways. People are saying things, asking questions that you can never anticipate. So you have to do quite a bit of testing to ensure this is robust enough to handle. Second thing is you have to do it in stages. Try to do a small scale and increase it. Um, we did this at Contact Center AI at Google. When we roll out deployment, we always do it in stages, both in terms of the volume as well as in terms of specific line of business, so that we can handle the different type of questions and the questions from different regions of the country. Um, um, to address any of those issues that may come up so that we can address it quickly.
Definitely. So final question here. What is your vision for where you see Tomato AI going? I know you kind of mentioned kind of the suite of solutions that are on the table today, from noise cancellation to accent softening to, perhaps some other features that you may be testing on the horizon here. You've spoken about the impact of where you're trying to drive these things to, and also kind of the nature of training a audio-based large language model and some of the emergent properties that can come of that. But specifically from your perspective, like what is your vision for where Tomato AI is going?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, our mission is to help people communicate better. And to me, this is a fundamental issue, right? People are always talking to each other. And as the world is more connected than ever, we have people from all kinds of backgrounds are talking to each other. My vision in the future is Tomato AI will be able to play a significant role in this. We'll be using Tomato AI technology, talking to people all over the world in this seamless fashion. We'll be able to communicate very effectively, even though we have different backgrounds and different accents. But we still be able to understand each other perfectly.
Definitely. Well, I look forward to that future vision, James. Really appreciate your time and sharing your insights today. We'll definitely have to catch up again in the near future here. Thanks so much, James.